Who should look after the homeless after fires destroy Europe's largest refugee camp? Thousands on the Greek island of Lesbos have nowhere to go. Islanders want the refugees gone forever. Will the disaster force Greece and the EU to rethink their asylum policies? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. Thousands of refugees are homeless in Greece after fires destroyed the biggest camp in Europe. It was the first point of call for many asylum seekers hoping to start a new European life. The Moria camp, built to house 3,000, had 13,000 packed in and living in squalor. Greece's migration minister said the refugees started the fires deliberately to protest against COVID-19 quarantine rules. Health workers in Lesbos admit they've lost track of some of the 35 asylum seekers who tested positive to the virus. And islanders see a chance to be rid of the unwanted visitors once and for all. John Soropoulos reports.
As you can see, Moria camp behind me, which has stood here for the past 8 years, is gone. It has finally been burnt to the ground. It's been the object of derision by media, by the people who lived here, by many of the NGOs who have served it and the aid organizations that have gone through here. It's finally gone. Its inmates, some 13,000 people, are now scattered in the olive groves and the hills around us. We can see some of them straggling back here today to pick up whatever belongings they can find that haven't been burnt by the fire that happened on Tuesday night and again on Wednesday night. But looking around me here, frankly, I see very little. I see door hinges, I see bolts, I see a few pots and pans, just metal pieces, the nails of houses lying on the floor, having fallen down from the roofs and the wooden walls that they held together. Nothing seems to resemble what it was. Nothing really looks like a hut or a chair or a table or a tree. It's almost as though we're on another planet. Everything has been reduced to its elements. This site, however, is where the government insists on rebuilding a new, secure, closed facility. The residents of Moria village, just a kilometre away from here, are absolutely against that, as is much of the island. They simply do not want a camp here anymore. The government says that is the wrong choice, that the islanders' resistance to such a camp is actually causing part of the problem. It has prevented the government from building a better facility. The refugees, however, are frankly agreed with the islanders. They want to leave too. This may now be harder than ever for them, because we're hearing that much of the paper archive of the asylum service that used to stand directly behind me here has been burnt. And that may mean that a lot of people are stuck here for months longer than they would be, because the records determining whether they would be granted asylum and allowed to move to mainland Greece or whether they would be deported back to Turkey are now gone, and many of those applications will have to start from scratch. For Al Jazeera Inside Story, I'm John Soropoulos on Lesbos.
2 Greek naval ships have arrived to house some of the homeless. The European Union is paying to transfer 400 children to mainland Greece. The leaders of France and Germany are working on a joint plan to accept some of the refugees.
They will have unacceptable living conditions for these people in this camp on Lesbos. So I've been concentrating on moving people out of there. So we have gone from 25,000 migrants to 12,000 migrants now. We have moved out the majority of the unaccompanied minors. They are being relocated to other member states, and we are also supporting better facilities, proper facilities for the migrants.
Let's meet our guests in Lesbos. Philippa Kempson, co-founder of the Hope Project, an aid organisation for refugees run by volunteers who are also asylum seekers. In Belgium's capital, Brussels, Damien Boschlager, member of the European Parliament and co-founder of Volt Europa. And in Thessaloniki, in northern Greece, Rory O'Keeffe, who runs a humanitarian analysis service. A warm welcome to you all. I want to begin in Lesbos with Philippa Kempson. The pictures that we've been seeing coming out of Lesbos, incredibly harrowing. That camp has been completely destroyed. Now, just bring us up to date. It was 3,000 people that were supposed to be housed there, but eventually it became 13,000?
Yeah, originally it was built for actually 750. When it was started in 2012, the capacity was 750. It was expanded late 2015 to accommodate 3,000 people. And in January this year, we actually had 20,000 people through the winter living in such horrific conditions. The numbers have dropped over the last months as people have been relocated to Athens. But yeah, 13,000 people were currently living in there when it caught fire.
And that's 13,000 people that no longer have a home, not that they had one before, they were living in a camp. That's 13,000 people that are going to be a problem, right?
Well, it's become a problem. I mean, at the moment, they're living on the streets. They fled with what little they could gather, depending on how close they were to the fire. It's day 2 now. We've just been told that the army is trying to distribute food rations, but up until a couple of hours ago, nothing had been distributed. We've been restricted access to getting to the refugees. They've cordoned off 6 kilometers either side of the camp. There's very few people getting through. We actually have warehouses in the area where the people are sleeping on the road at the moment, but we're unable to get through the police checkpoints to get the supplies to those in need.
But Philippa, when you're speaking to the people that you work with, some of whom are actually asylum seekers on Lesbos, they've lost their homes. I mean, what are you hearing from the people that were in that camp?
I mean, they're devastated. The children, there is a massive amount of children in that camp. The children are really afraid. You can imagine having fled war, terror, and so many other things, that suddenly to have what little you have left burned down and have to flee again into the night to an unknown future again. The trauma is just huge.
Rory O'Keeffe in Thessaloniki, yours and organisations like yours have been warning that something like this could happen. And now here we are, it has happened. I mean, there's no way Greece is ready to cope with something like this, or is it?
It depends what you mean. This incident should never really have happened. In fact, actually, the most surprising thing is that it hadn't happened previously. We've already talked about how almost unbelievably above its safe capacity Moria was. It is possible for Greece to find places on the mainland for the people who have had their shelters and their possessions burnt. However, what we have seen previously is that when people have been moved from the islands, they've been moved to refugee camps on the mainland. Those refugee camps are currently at their full capacity and in some cases over their full capacity. If we are going to talk about people being moved to the Greek mainland, those people need to be moved not to refugee camps, but to buildings. My preference, and I think the most sensible thing that could possibly happen here, is that in actual fact the 27 other states of the European Union can step forward and offer these 13,000 people places to stay within their countries.
Well, let's talk about the European Union. We have Damien Boschelager, who's in Brussels. It's been very quiet. The EU hasn't really had anything major to say for the last couple of years when it comes to this particular refugee camp, but refugees generally.
I think it's important to understand how the EU is built in a way, because the Commission actually proposed a new pact or like a new idea of how migration in the asylum system could look like. And in the Parliament in the last term, they also agreed on general lines of what could happen. But it always failed to get through the actual member states. So the ministers of the interior at some point were not able to sit down on a table to discuss the topic anymore. And that's why we have such an inaction for such a long period of time.
But it's not just inaction. I mean, you talk about the interior ministers there. It is a domestic issue for each country involved. Refugees, incredibly unpopular when it comes to domestic politics.
That's absolutely true. But still, I traveled to Lesbos, and I also visited the camp in Moria, which now burned down a year ago, and the situation was already horrible, as Philippa has said. I mean, almost 20,000 people back then living in horrible conditions on the floor without any basic sanitation. And then I thought something has to happen. And afterwards, I mean, the coronavirus came and we all thought, okay, now they're going to evacuate these camps because this is really too much. The danger of these people, 1,000 people queuing at the same water supply, everyone queuing 2 times a day for food. This is not going to be sustainable in a time when isolation should be possible. But nothing happened again. And now we see that the camp burns down or burned down, and we are unsure how governments will react. And if this is now finally enough so that you can overcome these national issues, that you overcome the interior policy kind of question and actually, take up responsibility as a government.
Philippa Kempson, a lot of the islanders are suggesting that actually this is a good thing, that will get rid of the refugees from the island. And actually what needs to be done is this is somebody else's problem. Let's just get rid of them. How much of a hindrance is that to any rescue efforts, any efforts to rehouse these people, in fact?
It's a huge hindrance. I mean, the only suggestions they've come up with so far to rehome these people is they've brought a ferry in from Blue Star Lines, which can house 1,000 people. They're trying to put tents on disused army sites, which are basically just fields again, with no infrastructure and no support. And at the same time, all the roads are blockaded either by local people who are angry or by the police. So those of us who have the aid to give and can try and alleviate this problem are once again thwarted from getting to help. And these people, how long do you go on the side of a road before you, with a hungry family, before you start trying to find food elsewhere? And there's local businesses there. It's not okay. They've come up with no sensible solution for this. And this is 5 years of this camp being over capacity. This is 5 years of people dying in the camp and nothing being done. And I don't know how the fire started, whether it's angry locals, whether it's angry refugees, because they've been locked up in quarantine basically since March. And now the quarantine has just increased because they have cases in the camp. But now you have 13,000 people with at least 35 of them testing positive for COVID on the street, and there is no solution. The mayor of the island, of course, called for civil action to stop these people being rehomed on the island. They've blockaded the road to stop the people being moved to the ferry that is supposed to house them. What is the solution? Moria should never have existed. Under EU humanitarian rules, under the United Nations Geneva Convention, this should never have been allowed to happen. And everyone involved has been warning about this for 5 years. It wasn't a case of if it would happen, it was a case of when it would happen. And nothing is being done. I mean, it's taken until this afternoon to mobilize the army to try and get food to these people. But it's just utterly ridiculous.
Damien Boschlager, our guest in Lesbos, is saying that this camp should never have been in existence. In fact, actually, it's illegal according to EU law actually itself. Yet it exists. There's a real politic here that we need to face. There are 13,000 people who are now homeless, and they're in Lesbos, and they're angering the local residents there who feel that they put up with them for long enough. There is potential here for clashes. There's potential here for a lot more problems than we're foreseeing right now.
I'm normally quite proud to be a European parliamentarian, but when I look at this situation, also when I saw the people on the ground and they asked me, what does Europe do to help us? What does the EU do to help us? I felt deeply ashamed to be a representative of this union. And as you said, Philip, and as you said, when it's like absolutely unfathomable how we lived with this policy of deterrence, of suffering, of death, of not granting people the basic rights that they were supposed to receive on European soil. And and how this could have been such a systematic approach until now. But what's even more shocking for me is that now we are talking about rebuilding the tents on the still warm ashes, of like basically repeating the same mistake once more, of not improving at all. And when I look at the medium-term perspective, very soon the European Commission will propose their new plan, how to get to the basically the next level of a European asylum system. And when I read the first ideas of what's potentially going to be in there, it's again border procedures, detention camps, and the same kind of mistake over and over again, which will lead to similar form of systematized suffering. So that's the issue that we really have to address, and where we have to say no more camps like Moria.
Rory, it was only a couple of weeks ago that we were talking about the refugee crisis in Greece. We were talking about how certain Greek islands were forcing people back on to the sea. There is a hardening, certainly in Greece, which is a frontline state, of its attitudes towards its refugees. Is this a hardening that's coming from the Greek government? It says, let's just make it so completely difficult for people to come here in the hope that they don't come to Greece.
There is certainly a feeling among refugees in the camps in Greece that this has been a deliberate policy, that you make conditions as hard as possible for people, and this will discourage people from coming. I think it's been a combination of failure and deliberate policy. I think it's come from the Greek government and the European Union. As has already been mentioned, these island camps, and it's not just Moria. On Samos, there is Vathi camp, where there are 604, well, the safe capacity is 648, and there are more than 4,700 people in that camp as we speak. These camps should not have existed. The conditions in them are at the absolute base level possible. I don't want to come out and state for certain that the Greek government has definitely done this in order to discourage people from coming, but I would say that Nea Demokratia in particular, since 2015, have been speaking openly about threats to Greek people, threats to Greek livelihoods, threats to Greek ways of life, and threats to Greek lives coming from refugees. As you say, we spoke about pushbacks, and certainly efforts have been made to discourage people from coming, which once again, unfortunately, does go against laws to which the Greek government and every EU member state are signatory.
Damien Boschlager, you've spoken to interior ministers, you've spoken to representatives of various different countries when it comes to the refugee crisis. Are you noticing a hardening of attitudes? Look, it's just not our problem anymore, it's somebody else's.
When crises like this one yesterday happen, I mean, I can still see a glimpse of remorse and like the feeling that something needs to be done, even when I talk to the interior ministers of the ministries of the different countries. But even, I mean, yesterday again, I reached out, and there's very often the kind of same, line that I hear, which is, yeah, we don't want to overstep. The Greek government needs to take care of this first. And then, yes, when we all have, when everybody acts in Finland to Bulgaria to, I don't know, all the EU member states, then maybe we can also do something, but only in a concerted action. And somehow this is the trauma of 2015, that they feel that, helping will already backfire and be negative. And as you said in the beginning, potentially, put more power into the hands of right-wing extremists, of populists. And it's really sad to see this game of hiding behind the other, again, between the Commission and the different member states happening, when you see that the tragedies of such a grand scale, I don't know if people really understand this, but if 13,000 people are in danger because there's a camp burning down that they live in, which is already below any humanitarian standards that you could imagine, and are now on the streets and need to be somehow helped, and this is on European soil, it's not somewhere else. It's actually, I took the plane to go to Lesbos. It's 5 hours, 6 hours from Brussels to get there. So it's not, crazy far away. And that people still believe it's okay to say, yeah, let's see who acts first and let's not take up responsibility. I think that's what makes me sad, and where I really believe we need to step up and also reach out to all of our governments to stop that.
Philippa, you've spoken very eloquently about the humanitarian side of this crisis, and certainly you've brought it to life for us. But there is another side to this as well. There is the administrative side to this as well. A lot of the documents needed by the refugees have disappeared in this fire. They've been burnt in this fire. There's a lot of problems now with, people's cases who may, is it the case that, anything that any paperwork they may have had that might have helped them to be rehoused has now just disappeared and they've got to start from the beginning again?
It's quite possible. For sure, the office of the asylum agency was completely destroyed. There's documents all over the floor. It's been filmed by the local media, but also people's personal documents that they had with them. If you don't have any documents proving where you're from or the reason for your asylum, so people have spent months and months, sometimes years, getting their case together, and they could have just lost everything. It's crazy. I don't know how much of the asylum agency in Moria was computerized and off-site, but I believe a large amount of everything is on paper because it's Greece, and that's kind of how we work here.
Rory O'Keeffe. Rory O'Keeffe,
Sorry.
it is paperwork that these people bring. I remember in Iraq witnessing people cross over the border into Syria holding plastic bags of documents. It is paper that and the people bring with them. This is going to be a problem, isn't it, moving forward, to actually try and get these people not just rehoused, but perhaps into another refugee camp?
I'm not sure it should be a problem for them to get into another refugee camp, although once again, I would stress that Greece at the moment, the situation with its mainland camps is slightly better than the situation with its island camps, but genuinely most of those camps are at or beyond capacity as well. This is why I would state again, European Union member states really do need to step up here and do something. In terms of what you say about documents, yes, absolutely, that's true. It does cause a problem. It causes a challenge, let's say. We are in a position already in Greece where new arrivals are being told that it will take 5 years to process their application. Now, for these people who have been here, in some cases 2 to 3 years, to be told that they need to start again is fundamentally unacceptable. As Philippa says, it is possible that some of the documents have been computerized. I very much hope that that is the case. We don't know. But there must be a way found for these 13,000 people in particular not to have to start again from scratch. It must be clear that these people have had their shelters burnt to the ground and many of their possessions, almost all of their possessions, including their documents, burnt. It seems, I will be honest with you, it seems a cruel and unusual punishment for a crime that hasn't been committed.
Damien Bolschlager, this is partly to do with the European Union when it comes to documentation, when it comes to getting people rehoused, permanently rehoused and given a new life. But here we are, you've got political pressures, you've got pressures from local governments, and you've also got an EU that seems to be ineffective. We have talked about this before, but I just want you to make the point clearly. Is there a mechanism, potential mechanism, to help these 13,000 people and others like them if this arises again, or is there just simply not?
I would separate the immediate help from the a bit more long-term perspective. And in the immediate help, obviously, when there's political will, we can do things, be it putting up a cruise ship that will shelter the people for at least a shorter period of time, or even better, relocate people as soon as possible from where they currently are to other member states, so that basically they're not stuck on an island, but that they can go through due process without having to wait 5 years for their asylum decision. That's the first thing that we have to do. That's a very humane and simple thing, which is helping people, giving them shelter, giving them food and healthcare. Very simple. The second part is, what do we learn from this? How can we make sure that this never happens again, that we don't institutionalize camps? And that's where it's so important that we now stand up in the discussions between the different institutions on the European level, but especially also in all the different countries of Europe, and say, okay, we want a system that is not built on suffering, not built on the idea of making it horrible for people on the borders to somehow deter people who want to come, but that we actually have a functioning system. And that can include returns, but it has to for sure include a due process where people, while they go through the process, are not suffering like people are now, not only in Moria, but also on the other camps, as the others have mentioned.
I do want to thank all our guests, Philippa Kempson, Damien Boschlager and Rory O'Keeffe. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. We are at AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here, bye for now.